I'm very briefly going to just add to some of the things Shane said, talk about experiential learning, which is very passionate to me. I think it's learning by doing is very important, so I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to get you doing a little exercise together, and we're going to talk about it. And but this session is going to be less you listening. You're going to be doing stuff. You're going to be doing stuff, and then I'm going to be asking you to tell me what you did. And so when we look at what experiential learning is and what we mean by that, we mean that we want you to do stuff. We want you to experience stuff. We want you to run things, run a simulation. We want you to negotiate with people. We want you to make people feel awkward. We want you to make people change. We want you to do stuff. And when you do stuff, then we say, well, what happened? How did morale go up? How did morale go down? How did profits and revenue change? Happiness? What happened to the cues in the system? What happened? So you did stuff. What happened? Okay? But so what? Why did it happen? Why did this go up? Why did this go down? And do you understand the causal explanations, or are you just guessing? Are you just pushing buttons and changing levers, whether that be in a game, a field trip, an exercise, whatever you're doing? Do you know why things changed and why they changed at a rate of time? And then finally, now what? What does that mean to you? Okay, so what are you going to do differently when you meet somebody? What are you going to do differently when you lead somebody? What are you going to do differently when you go back to your organization? How are you going to change how you work, how your team works, how your organization works? And we go through this cycle, and we go through it on a number of levels, and we try to do as much of it as possible. It's messy, it's ambiguous, it's difficult, and that's what we try to do. When you look around, you'll see this is what it looks like. You know, there are executive MBA people here, there are full-time MBA people here, and we want you to work together. We've got to do a lot of effort to make sure the fit is right. The last thing we want you doing is coming in a program and it doesn't suit you. That's not, so our team here, they will advise you on fit. It's very important in terms of fit, because when you're together, you work together. You work together in teams, you work together in groups, twos or threes. You know, you'll put in together your work, and you'll work with people you like, and you will work with people who make you feel uncomfortable because they're different, but you'll work together. And when you're working together, we want you to realize why you're doing it. Okay, you're not here today because you're bored. You're not thinking of doing an MBA because you've got too much money lying around and you don't know what to do with it. You want to go somewhere, you want to do something, you want to be something, you want to change the world. You have a reason for wanting to allocate your time, your money, your life, asking your family to support you to do something. And we will ask you repeatedly, why are you here? Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? And so that's central to it in terms of going forward. And lastly, all the things that you do, your behavior in the classroom, your behavior outside the classroom, we want you to be Beedie ambassadors. We want to be proud of you, so we ask you to think about the consequences of what you do. There are always consequences. Even when you're doing great things, if you're doing great things and creating great companies, who are you killing in the process? Which companies are you putting out of business? You know, do you know the consequences? Do it in a principled, ethical way and understand that. And so that's the sort of cycle that we go through in terms of our classes, our programs, and it's one of the sort of defining features of the Beedie graduate program experience. I also want to say that in terms of the online program that was mentioned earlier, which is a sort of taster and a starter into our programs, you can join that at any semester. So that has intakes at all 3 semesters. You can join it. It's flexible learning. You get to experience Beedie. We get to experience you. You work out which program you want to join. So what's going to happen now is that people are going to come around and distribute the following materials to your tables. With 170 people here, a small number of you may have done this before, but many of you won't. And they're going to distribute these materials. 20 sticks of uncooked spaghetti, 1 meter of tape, 1 meter of string, and 1 marshmallow. These are your materials, and these are the materials you must use to build something. You have a pair of scissors, you have a tape measure, but you have to build something, and the structure you have to build can only consist of these materials. Okay? 20 sticks of uncooked spaghetti, 1 meter of tape, 1 meter of string, 1 marshmallow. These are the materials that are coming around now. You are going to have to talk to each other now. So if you haven't talked already, you are going to have to work with each other and do something and work together. What are you going to do? You are going to build the tallest freestanding structure using only the materials. You know, you can use the scissors to cut things, and you can use the tape measure to measure things, but they cannot be part of your structure. Okay? We are going to measure the award-winning structure, the highest structure. The measurement is from the table to the top of the marshmallow. You cannot eat the marshmallow. You cannot cut the marshmallow up into bits, okay? The whole marshmallow must be on the top, okay? You will have 18 minutes to do this, okay? At the end, I'm going to ask you to discuss and share the process of building this structure. I want you to talk about what worked and what didn't work. The winning team is the one that has the tallest structure measured. The winning team will get lavish gifts. Okay, you have 18 minutes starting from now. So you have 14 minutes left. You're down to your last 3 minutes. 3 minutes. You have 1 minute remaining. You are down to your last 60 seconds. It has to be a freestanding structure. Over! Stand away! Stand away! Stand away! Move away! Oh! Oh! Okay, everybody stand away! Wow. Okay. Take your tape measure. Take your tape measure and measure from the bottom of the table to the top in centimeters, please. 64! I think we have a winner. 64! Okay, everybody, so you've just done something. What might we use this to use as a basis for learning? So you've just done something. What could we use this for as a basis for learning?
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Teamwork.
It's a whole icebreaker.
It's an icebreaker. It certainly is an icebreaker. But in terms of learning, teamwork is one. What other ideas? If you look, we have very different looking structures. This is probably the weirdest one. This one, the marshmallow, they've designed it so it's lowest to the ground as possible in terms of... It's very innovative. It's very innovative. What else could we use this for learning for?
Risk taking.
Risk. What else?
A deadline.
Project management. Time management. So a whole range of things that we could use it for. And I'm going to just use it to talk about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship and innovation. You look at the process you went through. One of the things about a research-led business school, which Beedie is that we study what makes good entrepreneurs, what makes good leaders, what makes bad leaders, what makes bad managers. And that's what we do. We study and we collect data. Some people are born natural entrepreneurs. They're born that way. They have an appetite for ambiguity. They love risk. They
they don't mind it, and there's not much you can teach them. But if you study entrepreneurs and you say, well, what are the traits of an entrepreneur? And could you become an entrepreneur? That's what we do. And you can become an entrepreneur. You might not be born one, and you might be born somebody who could never be an entrepreneur. And you're a great manager and a great leader and a different character. But if you have some traits to be an entrepreneur, we can tell you how to make them better traits. Because we study natural-born entrepreneurs and natural-born leaders, natural-born accountants. That's what we do as a profession. We study them and we try to... In the same way as that you can teach art, music, sport, cookery, professions and trades, and you learn by failure and you learn by doing, that's what we do. Okay? And so when we teach these skills, and I'm going to talk about how we would use this to sort of learn about the characteristics of entrepreneurs. So when we look, this guy here, Tom, his name's at the bottom there, he's done this test hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and he collects data on the individuals, collects data on the height, collects data on the structures, and he tries to work out what leads to the highest structure. And so if you got over 50, you're better than average. And we had quite a few over 50, so that's great. So well done, well done. And we would expect that you would be better than average because you decided to come here today. Okay? That decision is a self-selection mechanism. And the fact that you just made that smart decision already means that you're better than average. Okay? Traditional managers will score about 25 centimeters. So our highest one was 64. Lawyers, the lawyers do better than traditional managers. Kindergarten students. Okay? Up there, 75 students. So why would kindergarten students get higher than lawyers and traditional managers and the average? Why would the average kindergarten student here beat our winning one?
They don't fight for power.
Power, there's less power dynamics. I'm sure there is some power, but maybe it's less.
There's less fear.
Less fear of failure.
Experience?
Well, they're younger, so they should have less experience because they're younger.
But you don't have like a rigid idea of how it should look.
Yeah. They haven't been ruined by education. The key thing is that they learn by prototyping. I think nearly most of the tables here, you have one design and it's built. Some of you, this table here was one of the first to complete, and they just felt relaxed, and they could tell all the anxiety disappeared because they had a freestanding structure, it was there and everything else. And they had some discussions about whether they should escalate it or do things and get higher and stuff. But it was freestanding and it was there and it wasn't going to fall over. Kindergarten students learn by prototyping. They don't mind failures. They learn from the failures. So the traditional process is that traditional managers will say, well, what are the rules? And many of you would say, how do you measure it again? What can we use again? Like you're always working hard on the rules, looking to bend the rules, looking to optimize against the rules in terms of doing things. So the marshmallow has to be on the top. It has to be on the top. What are the rules of this game in terms of questions, and so traditional managers try to understand the rules of the game, plan to try and optimize to win the game. They then build, and then they say, ta-da! But quite a few of us heard, oops, in terms of it as it falls down. Okay? So this is a very linear process, and we did this in 18 minutes. And this could be a construction project, this could be a new venture project, this could be an alliance, this could be changing something. And so you knew that the goal was this freestanding structure. The future was 18 minutes away. And most teams, except for at the end, when things were falling apart and people were trying to hold up, any prototyping typically happened in the last minute. Okay, any prototyping typically. And so what kindergarteners do is that they will go through this cycle maybe 4 or 5 times in the same 18 minutes. Okay? And so they would build stuff, and if they do get a ta-da here, it stands up, then they will say, maybe we can go further and higher. They don't really have this fear of failure in terms of, it's playful. It's playful, they love it, they're just doing it for the fun of doing it. That's one of the things entrepreneurs do. They don't mind, they actually love it so much, they don't mind failure. They have affordable loss. Okay? If your structure fell down, how many of you are going to not sleep tonight? How many of you are going to quit your job on Monday because you could not build a freestanding structure higher than a kindergarten student? You know, there's no pressure there. They just love doing it. And we know that about entrepreneurs. They love it. They have a passion for doing it. And they will prototype. Think of the structure as a new venture. Think of the structure as a new venture or a project outcome or some sort of change. And this is the key difference, is they go through and they prototype. So this is one of the things. So when we're talking about experiential learning, we would say, well, we'd do something like this, and we'd ask you to say, what did you do? What were the results? And so we can measure the results. We can photograph the results and see the different outcomes. And then we can have causal explanations for why we got different outcomes. We could look at the makeup of the teams. We could look at the gender makeup, the age makeup, the skill makeup. You know, we could look at these things and try and say, well, how did this lead to a different outcome? This is research-based thinking in terms of, and that's how we study and teach, not just entrepreneurship, but innovation, accounting, leadership, operations management. Thankfully, architects and engineers do build the taller structures. So knowledge helps, okay? This team had someone in that category, and are you an architect or an engineer? Structural engineer. Structural engineer. So education, you know, appropriate domain-specific education helps. CEOs with assistants. Okay. Talk about the power dynamic, talk about roles. So you can use this to learn many, many different things. Project management, team diversity, team management, power. But here we're talking about entrepreneurship. So specialization and skills mean success. So we know that some diversity is good and too much diversity is bad. And we know that in teams generally. And so what we would say, well, what do we mean by diversity? And we tend to think of diversity in terms of gender and age and functionality. And so, but we don't tend to think about diversity in terms of preferences of values and traits. So who had the greatest appetite for risk, and who loved failure, and what are your traits in terms of doing this? We focus on variety. So the expertise, because it's easier to measure. You know, you all have job titles and histories and experience, and disparity is really, you know, CEO, everyone's an assistant, or they're all CEOs, and we can think about and measure diversity in these different ways. And again, this is another way of actually, and so again, if you're teaching entrepreneurship, you could talk about founding teams, and how founding teams change to adolescence teams, and how adolescence teams change to teams when you're going to scale, and how the different diversity varies. And we tend to just think about variety, okay, in terms of this. We don't tend to think about mindsets, introverts versus extroverts, and how they, and so that's what we try to cover in this sort of learning. But you see how we got you doing so. I'm talking now, so you have to listen now, and it's listening, and it's hard to facilitate a discussion with 170 people. But you can see how we design the process so the energy levels change, and that's a typical classroom experience. We manage that, we design that, but it's all driven for, it's not for entertainment and fun and laughter. There are learning goals that are part of it, and this is typical to a Beedie learning experience. So we know that, you know, there are different sort of rules on different amounts of variety. And we know that, like, so this is probably, I don't know, I haven't looked at them all, but this is definitely the weirdest one so far in terms of, it's very unique. And by weird, I mean innovative. And the one that was here and the other ones, you know, these towers, these are structural sort of, you know, best practice. And so you might say, well, let's start interviewing these people, because they produce, what's so special about them? You might find that they probably have a bit too much variety, and probably a bit too much separation, and they produce really radical innovations in terms of coming out. And, you know, and they weren't put together by design, they're just self-selected, so you get what you get, but you get a really interesting structure. We also know that so you didn't know, well, I told you that it was a lavish prize, and most of you didn't believe me that it was really lavish, but it is semi-lavish in terms of being Beedie swag. But if I told you that there was $1 million on the tallest structure, how would that change what just happened? If I said, look, I have a briefcase here and it's got $1 million in, And the team that has the highest structure will get that $1 million. How would that have changed the last 18 minutes of that exercise? How would it have changed?
Well, you might have had your resources shift. If someone was a project manager on the team, they would have taken a lot more supplies.
Done a lot more planning, understanding, maybe project management. How else would it change if there was a $1 million prize?
Less success.
Less success. I can tell you that the average would go down by about 10, 50. It would crush you. It would crush you. It'd paralyze you in terms of so we have quite a good number of freestanding structures. There'd be less freestanding structures, and what is standing would be smaller. This table came up, they would say, look, $1 million, it's standing. Let's just keep it. Like, let's wait for everybody else to fail. We're going to get the $1 million in terms of doing things, in terms of... so different mindsets, different cultures will take place if you do this. And we know this. So if you don't have any skills and you have massive incentives, it goes down. If it's highly skilled, so team of structural engineers, the roles, it's all designed, you design the team, then you're more likely to get success. We place a lot of time on designing the teams within your cohorts. When you go on to do case competitions, we want you to win. We want you to make yourselves look good. We want Beedie to look good. We want you to have success. And so we place a lot of emphasis on designing teams. Let's just talk about, so there was 2 optional readings, and don't expect everyone to have read those readings, but there are 2 very, very mini little cases about some entrepreneurs who achieved success. And the questions were, how did they achieve so much with so little? In terms of, and so one of the entrepreneurs was Stacey Andrus, who is the founder of Stacey's Potato Chips. What did Stacey want to be? What does Stacey and her husband Mark want to be? It's called Stacey's Chips because Stacey and Mark are now divorced. But it was. What did Stacey and Mark want to be before they got divorced? Restaurateurs, passionate about food. So let's talk about their journey. You've just done a journey, okay? And what was their journey? What was their prototyping in their journey?
Well, a lot of it is like classic CPG. So how do you want to package the product? How do you want to price it? What's the recipe? And a lot of CPG successors, such as Benjamin Donuts, a lot of makers within Chicago followed kind of their path.
But what did Stacey do? What did it say in the reading? Food cart. So that's best practice. But what is it? They did a food cart. And why? And that's the prototyping. And so, and why is that a small step? Because it's cheaper, it's easier to do, and practical. What do you learn by doing that?
You're measuring your demand.
Measuring demand. What else do you measure? Market.
You're testing out this product in the market. People buy your product.
You're learning about the product. What about yourself? What are you learning about yourself? Who wants to be an entrepreneur here? Do you really want to be an entrepreneur? Do you really want to mortgage your house? This is a test. Do I really love food? Do I really want to be in the food business? Yes, I can test a market. Yes, I can test a product. But you can also learn about yourself. Do I really want to be an entrepreneur? Or do I want a 9-to-5 job? A 9-to-6 job? Do I want a pension? Do I really love dealing with customers? Do I really love dealing with customer service? So these are all things that you can test. So what else did Stacey? So Stacey gets the food cart. How do they go from food cart to potato chips? Say again, sorry?
In the evenings or on the weekends, they used to make the chips from the leftovers.
That's what they did, but how did they get to there? So how do they go from food cart to being in the chip business? They found the chips are popular because
There's too much of a lineup.
too much of a lineup is a problem. So to solve this problem and to handle waste, leftover pita bread, to recycle waste, we're going to cook it, we're going to bake it. And so you can see it really is not a linear process. They want to be restaurateurs, they end up with chips, and in between they've got dealing with lineups and food carts and all sorts of other things. It is a series of experiments. It's a series of prototyping. And Stacy just does this and does it smart in terms of naturally, and when you study successful entrepreneurs, that's what they do. Because if you're going to start a restaurant, it's going to cost you $500,000 to refit the restaurant, and that just crushes you. And so unless you are a serial entrepreneur and you've already been there and done it and you've got the money, that big end point crushes you. And so you do lots of small steps. So Stacy then starts baking at home. She does, everything is small. Everything is small steps in terms of going forward. And so it's represented by this exercise that you've just done. And we have data to prove that if you were to go through prototyping, you would actually get bigger structures. Final little case, Jim Poss. So what would be Jim's experiments? What would be his prototyping? So, how much did it cost to make the first prototype of this? When he was going to make the first prototype, how much did he get? What were the quotes? How big was it? Up to $400,000 to make the first one. So let's go back and look at all the small steps he did. Very, very small steps. So what did he do first of all? What was his first small step? What was the smart thing that he did? The very, very first thing. He went to get an MBA, okay? He dropped out of work because he wasn't passionate about his work, and he spent some money at Babson, a great school in Boston that focuses on entrepreneurship, and he took that step, and he used it to learn, he used it to find out. What did he do next? While doing his MBA, what did he do next? He went to work, he did an internship somewhere. Spire, I think it was, company that has solar-powered technology. And he was pitching the idea, they wouldn't take it. Where did he get his first prototypes from? Compactors, residential compactors. How much did he pay for them? $150. So when we do experiments in terms of like how to market our programs, we do experiments and we say this is the small budget. It's not like what do we get and what are the numbers and what do we learn and what do we come out. He spends $125 on 2 compactors. And he wants to learn about the mechanics and he wants to learn about the viability, and he's taking small steps. He doesn't go straight forward to the $400,000 prototype, okay? Because he doesn't have $400,000. Okay, if he's Elon Musk, he'd do it. But he has to take steps to actually convince people and pitch the idea in terms of going forward. So how much did he sell his first compactor for? $6,000. And where did he sell it to? Veil. So there's an expression in entrepreneurship is, what is your veil? What are you going to learn? Where are you going to make the first prototype and where are you going to sell it to? And what are you going to learn? And so why do they sell it to Veil? And the characteristics of the market? Remote area, environmentally friendly, rich, wealthy, environmentally friendly to the extent that some activists had just burnt down a new planning development. And so that was their veil. What are we going to learn from actually doing this? When it gets delivered, what happens? Falls off. That's an accidental experiment, but it actually demonstrated how robust this technology was. And it cost him more than $6,000 to actually make that prototype. He wasn't doing it to make money, he was doing it to learn, to demonstrate. And they learned, oh yeah, it'd be great if we had a Wi-Fi capability on this. And when you look at the video, if you look at the video in the reading, you'll see that the Wi-Fi component is massive to reducing fuel consumption. So the value added of this is that it compacts 8 or 9 times as much as a normal trash can, which means that you typically have 8 or 9 times less journeys. But because these are connected to the grid, then you can have an operations management solution in terms of the traveling salesman problem, what's the shortest route, because garbage trucks have like a miles per gallon, about 3 or 4 miles per gallon, very expensive. And so all the way through, he's doing experiments. Okay? And so this is just an example class. The discussion we're having here, this is great discussion. And in a class of 40, it'd be more intimate and be more critical, and we go around and we see who's done the readings, and you bring your own experience into it. And so, and this is a typical MBA classroom experience at Beedie. It's not you listening to me, it's us engaging, it's working through the story, working through the learning point, saying, right, we did something. What happened? So what? And then we ask you, what are you going to do now? Okay? And you might say, that was great. The one thing I learned is I am never going to be an entrepreneur. That's a great learning. I don't have the appetite for it. That's a great learning outcome. Okay? I'm a manager. I like to manage, refine, polish. And that means that you'd say, these are my mindsets. I have a causal mindset. I like lots of planning. I like to have a linear outcome. I like to optimize. And I hate failure. I don't really have an appetite for failure. That's absolutely fine, because only about 15% of the world are the opposite, where they love failure and they get fun out of it and they have affordable loss and they love to experiment and that's what they thrive on and they can handle it. And so we call these two different mindsets. The causal mindset is knowing what the output is. It's fixed, you know what the rules are, and it's very repetitive, and you're just going to polish and refine and be dependable in terms of outcomes. Here, yes, you know that the goal is this high structure, but we have very different outcomes, okay? We have very different outcomes. You're just given your own resources, which is the resources here were spaghetti, marshmallow, and tape, and you produced an outcome. It looks, there are very different structures here, square structures, triangular structures, pinnacle structures. You would do a lot more of this, okay? Do a lot more of this in terms of the time. And again, this exercise is designed to bring out these behaviors in terms of, because this is what actually happens. And you're happy about embracing and learning from failure. And we know that when you look at those mindsets, traditional managers are very high here, okay? Traditional good managers. And we know that when you look at the life cycle of a company, that changes from startup to running, to rolling out, to diffusing it. But innovative entrepreneurs are up there. And they're very good at creating things. But they're maybe not very good at running things. And we know that angels and VCs and different people have different perceptions. It's very difficult to be ambidextrous. It's very difficult for people to be both very high here and very high there. It's very, very rare. And that's why we have teams. That's why we have organizations. And that's why you have to understand each other. And that's why you work together. And that's what you would learn on the Beedie MBA. So thank you very much.